Imagine you are at a party where people are laughing, are talking, are dancing, and are drinking. And imagine that for some reason you decided some time ago that drinking is no longer something that you want to do, either due to your health, either due to your intellectual, to your ambitions, to your goals, or to your spiritual perspectives. You no longer want to drink. But then you're there in that setting and everyone is doing it and everyone is having fun and you're with your friends and the setting feels perfect. And then you find yourself wondering, but why wouldn't I drink? What's wrong with letting go of my ideals, of my goals, of my aspirations for one moment and giving in to the present moment, giving in to the atmosphere of the moment, of giving in to what the moment is asking of me? Not that drinking is necessary, but it's about belonging to the present moment. It's about not being in control of something. This is a debate that happens quite often because as humans, we have a spiritual side, an intellectual side, but then we also have a material, earthly side, which seem to often be in conflict. The material side is the thing that drives us to like food, to like music, to like dancing, to like sex, to contemplate the beauty of nature, to just do as life calls us to just be in the present, to be spontaneous, to do whatever seems right at the moment. And then the other side, the spiritual, the intellectual side of us, is what calls for our ambition, for our goals, for our motivations, for our aspiration, for the things that we want to become, that we want to do in the future. And the problem is that there is often the question of whether peace and fulfillment comes from the complete surrendering to our material existence, to our almost animal like state, or to the complete relinquishing of the material side and acceptance of what we are beyond our matter. And I think that it's in the context of this debate that the book Zorba the Greek by Nikos Kazantzakis comes to give us this very interesting and fresh perspective. In this book, we follow Zorba, Alexis Zorba, which is an anti-philosopher. For him, philosophy, life isn't found in books, in ideals, or in philosophy even. Philosophy is found just through living. He's a character that dances, that laughs, that eats, that drinks, that makes a lot of mistakes, that has a lot of women, but does all that in such a pure state of presence that he ends up finding, in a way, almost illumination because he's completely aligned with what he is as both an animal and a piece of God. The interesting thing about his book is that we see the story through the eyes of the narrator, which in many ways is us. He's an intellectual. He's used to thinking his way through life, of reading his books and his philosophies and his ideas, and is driven by his noble but very egotistical ambitions about changing the world and changing the lives of others. The interesting thing about this book is that we see the story through the eyes of the narrator, which in many ways is meant to symbolize us, the intellectuals, the people who spend our time thinking about life, reading books and having ideals and having ideas of how life should be lived. We have this very noble but pretty egotistical ambitions about life, how we want to change the world and change the lives of others for the best. To all of that, there's a point in the book where the narrator tells Zorba, but why don't you write the book about how you see life, Zorba, with your fascinating philosophy of just simply living, of simply being present and letting go of any pretenses? To which Zorba responds, well, for the simple reason that I live all those mysteries, as you call them, and I haven't the time to write about them. Sometimes it's war, sometimes women, sometimes wine, sometimes my instrument, the santuri, which is a typical Greek instrument. Where would I find time to drive a miserable pen? That's how the business falls into the hands of the pen pushers. All those who actually live the mysteries of life haven't the time to write. And all those who have the time don't live them. Don't you see? Zorba embodies the wisdom of the body through touch, through smell, through existence, through dance, through laughter, through sex, through women. He denies an existence that is theoretical, that is not through the experience. Zorba embodies the wisdom of the body, the wisdom of taste, smell, song, laughter, dance, women, drinking, pleasure, sorrow. He trusts experience, life, real life, material life above anything else, above any ideal or moral even. He says it often, and I'm a man with no morals. I have no ideal that I attach myself to, except the ones that I can experience with my own hands, eyes, and smell. This is the reason why he goes about life as if seeing everything for the first time. Every time there is a cloud, a rain, the sea, an animal, a beautiful woman, food, wine, he stops to just wonder at how that beautiful, horrible thing is possible. What's this thing that life is bringing me right now that is so fascinating, that is so beautiful, that is so horrible? How can life be so rich? As they say in the book, the soul is flesh as well, perhaps more volatile, more diaphanous, perhaps freer, but flesh all the same. And also that this is what a real man is like, I thought, envying Zorba's sorrow. A man with warm blood and solid bones who lets real tears roll down his cheeks when he's suffering. And when he's happy, he does not spoil the freshness of his joy by running it through the fine sieve of metaphysics. He's just happy. This is one of the most beautiful and important parts of this book, is that instead of escaping the material world, as some philosophies suggest, for example, there's a lot of ideas of asceticism, of relinquishing food, of relinquishing, of embracing celibacy, of relinquishing substances such as alcohol, like I mentioned in the beginning, in order to find enlightenment, in order to find freedom and peace of mind. But what a lot of those philosophies end up lacking and misunderstanding, I believe, is that we are here with this material existence for a reason. Otherwise, we would still be floating around disembodied, but we are embodied creatures. we have this divine essence, but it's a divine essence that is embodied in a material world, in this carnal existence. And it's not to say that we are just mindless animals running around. We should completely give in to all of our desires, but it's not in forsaking them that we will find freedom. Because we all know that when we try to control and when we try to restrain ourselves the most, that's the moment when we're the most obsessed and the most miserable, because we never have peace of mind. It feels as if we're always controlling a part, an inherent part of what we are. And instead of it giving us more freedom, which is the purpose, it just becomes a prison. And this is where Zorba kind of found something very precious, because it's in the complete giving into his nature that he finds his freedom, to the point where the narrator is completely in awe of his philosophy, because he has spent his years, his life, reading away life instead of just living it, instead of finding the wisdom that he so dreadfully seeks. And there's an episode in the book where Zorba is talking about how he freed himself of his obsession with cherries, because There's a point when he was a child, all he thought about was cherries. He loved cherries, so all he thought about was cherries. And what we would do in these circumstances? Normally, when you're obsessed with something, when you want to control something, you just restrict yourself heavily. You find a logical reason why being obsessed with something is bad, and so you restrict it. But what that does is that it creates more obsession on your part. It's a form of attachment that becomes greater the more you attach yourself to the idea that this is bad. And so what Zorba does is that he recalls being a child and deciding consciously to eat so many cherries, as many cherries as he wants on one day. And he just spends hours eating cherries to the point where he becomes so sick of cherries that he never thinks of them again. He never eats a cherry again because he allowed himself to be so filled, so possessed by the desire for cherries that he completely fulfills that desire and it never crosses his mind. It never comes to disturb him again. And so for Zorba, joy and suffering are two sides of the same coin which are absolutely essential for us to live a meaningful and fulfilled life. There's no escaping the trials, the tribulations of being alive. But there's so much peace when it comes to when you accept that it's going to happen and might as well just completely dive into it, completely fall into what is to be alive, which is to suffer, but also to laugh and to have joy. Self-fulfillment comes not from avoiding pain, but from living it deeply, so deeply that we realize that it's part of the dance of life. And speaking of dance, one of I think my favorite segment of this book is when Zorba is explaining that words to him are quite poor and quite lacking sometimes. And he's talking about how when he met this Russian soldier when he was at war, and how because they didn't speak the same language, sometimes it was necessary to speak in other ways, to find other ways to communicate. And for him, it was dancing. So he's explaining at some points, he's talking about his life to this Russian soldier, and he's trying to speak, but he cannot. And the moment where he cannot find the words in a way that the Russian soldier understands, he just stands up and dances. He just dances what he wants to say. And they understand each other completely. Because more than words, more than these intellectual artifacts of expression, there's the natural expression of the body, of life, that is in this book embodied through dancing. What I found the most interesting about this book is that despite the collapse of these two men, of these two forms of living life, Zorba continues to be Zorba, and the narrator continues to be the narrator, pretty much. She continues on being this tortured intellectual that is trying to find meaning in his books. And perhaps this is a message that the writer leaves to us, for us to try to integrate Zorba and the intellectual side of us into our existence. Because we do need goals, we do need ambitions and a drive in life. But you can perfectly be completely embodied in your existence. You can be perfectly present in everything that you're doing while still having those ambitions. So it's up to us to balance the Zorba in us and the intellectual in us in order to create the middle path, which is the path of our virtuous. Virtue always stands in the middle. And that's the hardest thing to do in life, but it's the most important thing we could ever do. And this is where the narrator says that this is true happiness. To have no ambition and to work like a horse as if you had every ambition. To live far from men, not to need them, and yet to love them. To take part in the Christmas festivities, and after eating and drinking well, to escape on your own, far from all the snares, to have the stars above, the hand to your left and the sea to your right, and to realize of a sudden in your heart that life has accomplished its final miracle. It has become a fairy tale.